She slept in the saloon corner, her dreams tangled in a haze of cigarette smoke and the dull thrum of whispered secrets. Clara was a familiar sight in that old space, a faded photograph hanging on a wall of memories best left untouched. The saloon, with its creaking floors and flickering lanterns, was both her sanctuary and her prison. While patrons laughed and swapped stories, Clara slept, wrapped in the cover of her own solitude. She would choose that corner near the window where the light sometimes crept in, bringing with it a glimmer of hope that never seemed to last. That corner had overheard many conversations, some light, others heavy with loss, but none passed through without touching her in some way. One night, as heavy clouds rolled in, the door swung open and the storm let loose. Rain poured like tears, soaking the streets and making the world outside a darker place. Inside, the usual shuffle of boots and chatter faded, and curiosity took hold as a figure walked in. A man tall and rugged, with an air of familiarity that stirred something deep inside Clara. It was Tom. Tom was a name as old as her scars, a name that once held laughter and comfort. But now years had come between them, years filled with silence and hard choices. He stood there, shaking off the rain, and for a moment the world held its breath. Clara's heart thudded in her chest. She had dreamed of this day, but now that it was real, her mind raced with fear. Would he remember her? Would he even care? There was an ache in her heart, an echo of what once was. She wanted to close her eyes again and slip back into sleep, away from the reality that had shaped her life. The bartender, an old man named Gus, was wise to the movements of the heart. He had seen Tom's eyes scan the room and land on her, and he felt the tension thickening like the storm outside. Slowly, he decided to walk over to Tom, wiping his hands on a rag and leaning against the bar. "Tom," Gus said, his voice steady. Tom looked at Gus, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Why, maybe," Gus replied, his gaze drifting toward Clara. "But so have you. Life shapes us all, lad." Clara could see Tom from her corner, framed by the doorway. The man she had loved was still there, wrapped in shadows and illusions. But now she was not the same girl he had known. Her laughter had been replaced by quiet sorrow. After years of searching for herself in the chaos of life, she didn't want to be reminded of a past that felt like fragile glass. Yet heavens, how she craved the warmth of familiarity, the touch of someone who knew her heart. Tears she had cried in solitude whispered against her stillness, begging for release. But would he see that girl still clinging to life in the shadows? With a deep breath, Tom stepped forward. Each step was weighted as if he was walking on the dreams she had cast aside. Clara's heart raced, and she fought against the urge to shrink back into the darkness, but she wouldn't, not this time. His voice was rough but warm as he approached her corner. She blinked and opened her eyes, trying to catch the flickers of hope. Time stretched around them, wrapping their words in the soft cocoon of memories. They were thrown into a world where silence spoke volumes, where glances held the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, pushing back his uncertainty. "Neither did I," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. It felt like stepping into a river after years of standing on the banks, familiar yet daunting. He settled himself on a nearby stool, and for a moment the biting tension eased. "You look, people change," she said, her chin lifted defiantly. But deep down she was afraid he would only see the defeat lurking in her eyes. Her past had carved her into a puzzle, pieces scattered and lost, and she had fought to put them back together in any way she could. "Yeah," Tom replied, his expression unreadable. "I've changed too," he admitted, his voice deepening as memories flitted across his mind. The world outside hasn't stopped turning. The grip of nostalgia weighed heavy, compelling them both to confront the past they had tried to escape. Each beat of silence begged for a story, and slowly they started to share. Words flowed like the rain outside, revealing raw edges and tender points they had buried for too long. Clara told him about her struggles, the nights she had spent frightened and alone, her fight to find herself in the noise. Tom shared his journey too, the battles he fought, the hopes he smothered. Their words bounced around the room as if embracing each other, igniting laughter and igniting blisters of pain. Time faded into the background. The patrons drifted in and out, blending into a hum and leaving only Clara and Tom, as if the world had narrowed down to the two of them, suspended in a moment that welcomed both grief and joy. They were two souls seeking comfort in the comforting embrace of shared suffering. But just as Clara felt the warmth of connection, a shadow moved in the corner of her eye. A rough-looking man entered the saloon, his laughter too loud and too harsh against the gentle words Clara and Tom exchanged. He wore an arrogance that drew attention in ways that made Clara's heart race with dread. She remembered him well, a past filled with threats and intimidation. He was trouble, someone always lurking at the edge of her life, waiting to strike. He called out, his voice a jagged edge slicing through the nostalgic warmth. Tom's expression went tense, a storm brewing in his eyes. "Try to forget him," she mumbled, trying to wave away the dark presence. But the fear that lived in her heart leaped once again, erupting like flame. Tom was standing now, shielding her, pushing back against the unwelcome reminders of her past. "Just saying hello," the man said, a mockery in his tone. "Been looking for you." His gaze flicked between Clara and Tom, amused by the tension enveloping them. Tom's voice surged with intensity, the protective instinct igniting. Clara felt the swell of panic rise in her throat. This was a moment that could shatter everything she had hoped for in finding Tom again. The laughter around them faded, replaced by a heavy silence wrapped in danger. The man laughed, the sound echoing like thunder, and in that moment the fear bubbled over. Clara felt small and powerless, mere ashes in a storm, but she couldn't let the darkness win. She shouted, the words tearing from her throat. They hung in the air like a declaration, piercing through the suffocating tension. The man's amusement faltered for a moment, surprised by the fierceness in her voice. Tom stepped closer to her, not leaving an inch of space. Clara could feel her heart pounding, alive with courage. The weight of her past felt momentarily light, heavy chains broken by the flame of resolve. They were not alone. She turned to Tom, and in his eyes she found the strength she desperately needed. Man, sensing the shift, twisted his lips into a sneer. You really think you're safe? As quickly as he had appeared, he turned and exited the saloon, his laughter trailing like smoke. Silence enveloped them, the storm outside no longer the only fierce presence in the saloon. Clara exhaled a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Are you? Tom asked, his voice softening. I didn't want to be afraid anymore, she admitted, her eyes glistening. He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. Then don't be, you're stronger than you know. In that moment, the storm outside felt like a distant memory. Clara realized the truth. No matter the shadow that fell behind them, she had someone willing to stand in the light with her. They would weather it together. As the night drew to a close, laughter once again filled the saloon, but this time Clara was part of it. The corners of her heart, once filled with dread, began to fill with warmth. Tom shared stories that made her laugh, tales that danced between loss and hope, bridging the years that had kept them apart. And in every shared smile, in every exchanged glance, she felt the promise of tomorrow unfolding slowly, a new chapter waiting to be written. For the first time in a long time, Clara slept easy that night, cradled in the warmth of renewal. She would face the shadows of the past, but with Tom by her side, she knew she was no longer alone. She had woken from her slumber, ready to rise and live, knowing that a storm might rage outside, but within the saloon, love sowed the seeds of possibility. She slept in the saloon corner, her breath steady, the flicker of candlelight casting shadows on the rough wooden walls. It was a corner where dreams went to fade, and yet there she lay, cozy under a worn blanket, the distant sound of laughter mixing with the clink of glasses. The saloon had a life of its own, filled with stories waiting to be told, and Clara was just a whisper in that vibrant air. But on that fateful night, something shifted. There was an unmistakable tension, a charge in the atmosphere that prickled at the backs of necks. It was the arrival of someone who, for better or worse, would shake the very foundations of her existence. The door swung open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the night. Rain poured outside, tiny rivulets weaving down the dirt-streaked windows, but it didn't matter to the man who stepped inside. Boots squelching on the wooden floor, he took a moment to scan the room. And there, in the midst of the flickering light and rough laughter, was Clara, still cocooned in her dreams. Tom, a voice rumbled from the bar, breaking through the haze of noise. It was Gus, the bartender, a man with weathered lines etched deep into his face, eyes that had seen both joy and sorrow. Tom's gaze locked onto Clara, a mixture of hope and hesitation swirling in the depths of his deep-set eyes. Clara felt the pull even in her sleep, a magnetic force tugging at her heart. It stirred something ancient within her, a longing she thought buried deep beneath the layers of pain and solitude. Yeah, Tom replied, his voice carrying weight, reverberating against the saloon's sturdy walls. In that instant, Clara's eyes fluttered open, the world rushing back to her like a tidal wave. Memories washed through her, tender and painful laughter shared, secrets whispered beneath the stars, promises made under the moonlight that felt like magic. But those days were gone, replaced by silence and distance. She pushed herself up, trying to shake off the haze of sleep, but her heart raced as Tom approached. He was a ghost from her past, revived by the sheer force of life demanding clarity. The room pulsed with tension as everyone turned their attention to the two of them, their stories intertwining on the canvas of the saloon. She asked, the words escaping before she could catch them. There was disbelief laced with a hint of fear. After all these years, why was he back now? Tom stopped a short distance from her, vulnerability flickering behind his bravado. I was worried, he said simply, as if that were enough. Clara echoed, her voice tight, a mix of emotions battling within her. Gus, sensing the brewing storm, decided to intervene, sliding a drink across the bar to Tom. Now maybe not the best time for a rekindling. Tom ran a hand through his hair, the weight of their past palpable between them. But I had to come. I kept hearing things, Clara scoffed, rising from her seat, anger and hurt boiling just beneath the surface. You mean the rumors, the lies? Tom held his ground, muscles tense, eyes glimmering with regret. No, I came for you, you know that. The saloon held its breath, and in that moment Clara realized how much she had missed him, and how much she had feared losing herself in that longing again. The walls felt closer, almost suffocating with past memories embedded in every crack and crevice. She shot back, fighting against the vulnerability that threatened to unravel her. Sinking back against the rough wall of the corner, Clara wrestled with the truth her heart yearned for him, but her mind warned her to guard the pieces of herself that felt frayed and worn. "I know I messed up," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You think I wanted this life? Every day and night spent grappling with who I've become without you. You chose silence." Tom began, but she cut him off, the room tightening around them as tension thickened. Suddenly, the door swung open again, and a figure stumbled in, a local roughneck named Charlie, known for causing trouble and stirring unrest. Everyone turned to him, sensing something off-kilter in his stance. "Look who backslid into town," Charlie jeered, his voice dripping with mockery, the bravado that accompanied reckless abandon flaring to life. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and his presence rattled the fragile peace in the air. "Leave it out, Charlie," Gus warned, his voice low and firm. "Why, she likes the company," Charlie sneered, his eyes darting between Clara and Tom, a predator sensing weakness. He approached Clara, casting a shadow over her like a thundercloud. "How long you want to hide in here?" Tom stepped forward, protective instinct flaring. Charlie laughed, a hollow sound that resonated unpleasantly. "Or what?" An icy dread slid down Clara's spine. Charlie's words had a way of cutting deeper than they should, making her question everything, her strength, her choices. Would her past always cast a shadow over her present? Clara shouted, her voice stronger now, shaking off the power that Charlie had over her. The room froze, but that moment of defiance snapped something inside her, a realization that she had more fire left. It wasn't about Tom, Charlie, or the past, it was about her. Freedom and the choices she needed to reclaim for herself. Charlie seemed taken aback, stumbling slightly as if her strength had caught him off guard. Tom caught her gaze. "You don't have to fight this alone," he said softly, his voice anchoring her in a sea of turmoil. But Clara felt the power surge within her, the clarity illuminating her thoughts. "But I have," she replied steadily. Tension hung like a fog around them. After a loud crack of laughter, Charlie's bravado flared. "You think you're something because he's back," but Tom's presence felt solid, grounding her in the storm. "She knows what it means to stand alone," he said with quiet strength directed at Charlie. "And she knows what it means to rise above." With that, the room shifted, the attitudes around them changing like the wind. Tom's words hung in the air, and slowly the patrons began to nod in agreement, voices rising in affirmation, boosting Clara's spirit. Charlie's facade faltered, his bravado dimming in the face of unity. He shrugged, dismissing them with a sneer as he slinked out the door, leaving anger still simmering but back straightened, hearts bolder. Tom asked Clara gently, looking straight into her eyes. "More than okay," she admitted, finally finding ground beneath her. Surrounded by the camaraderie of the saloon, Clara embraced the warmth and support enveloping her. "I've missed this place," Tom said, referring to the camaraderie, the spirit that had always pulled them in. "Me too," she agreed, feeling a mix of nostalgia and newfound determination. Buried beneath the pain, they had shared moments of joy, laughter that echoed against the saloon walls, and dreams bursting with life. Tom asked, his eyes on her like a map, tracing the path of their intertwined lives. "Now," she began, pausing to gather her thoughts, "I choose to live. I choose to not let the past sculpt my future." Tom nodded, understanding blooming between them, a shared recognition of what they had lost and what they could rebuild. The room felt brighter, opportunities sparking like flint against steel. As the stories began to flow once more, Clara felt alive. The laughter and warmth of the saloon surrounded her, a symphony she had missed. Each word spoken reminded her that she was not just a mere shadow. She was a vibrant, living spirit rising from the ashes of yesterday. Tom was there, and he felt like home, a piece of her past that could forge a new future. Together they would navigate the lingering shadows, but the weight felt lighter now, buoyed by shared strength and unbreakable resolve. Through the chaos and uncertainty, Clara knew one thing for sure. She would no longer sleep in the saloon corner, hidden and afraid. Instead, she would stand tall in the light, ready to embrace whatever came next, hand in hand with the one who had come back to her, and this time they would shape the story together. She slept in the saloon corner, her breath steady and soft, immersed in a dream of another time. The saloon was a cacophony of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the deep, warm voices of men trading stories. In the dim light, the world seemed to spin around her, a vibrant tapestry woven with the ups and downs of life, filled with people seeking solace, joy, and sometimes just a drink. But this night was different. A storm raged outside, the wind howling like a restless spirit. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with an unusual tension, an energy that made the hairs on Clara's neck stand up. The door swung open, but she didn't stir. The comforting embrace of her dreams held her tight. A deep voice shouted from the entrance. The bartender, a broad-shouldered man with a face full of character, looked up from his post. The man who had just entered was no stranger, but the mere sound of his voice sent a shockwave through the saloon. It was Tom, a piece of Clara's past, who had vanished just as quickly as he had come into her life. Gus nodded, glancing over at the corner where Clara lay. "She's right there," he said quietly. Tom's gaze zeroed in on her, and in that moment Clara felt something stir deep within her. Memories flooded back, laughter beneath the stars, whispered secrets and promises made in the warmth of summer nights. But those days felt worlds away now, blurred by the fog of time and sorrow. Once again, the door creaked open and patrons turned to look. The thunder outside rumbled like an old beast waking from slumber, its roar competing with the tension thickening in the room. Clara's heart raced, caught in the grip of old emotions as she slowly blinked awake, the light flooding over her like an unwelcome dawn. She found Tom standing tall, soaked from the rain, his eyes searching for hers. He looked every bit the man she'd once known, a rough edge, a storm brewing within. He called softly. She echoed, her voice shaky but steady as she rose to sit, suddenly acutely aware of the weight of the saloon's attention. He stepped closer, the history between them crackling in the air, a palpable living thing. "I had to find you." Clara swallowed hard. "And what do you want?" "I want to talk," he said, the urgency in his voice making her pulse quicken. She shot back, anger flaring even as confusion gnawed at her. "That you vanished without a word." The words came rushing out, years of frustration bubbling to the surface like a long-held breath finally released. The patrons exchanged glances, the tension morphing into something electric, something raw. Tom opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the bartender leaned against the bar, interjecting, "Maybe she has a point, Tom." He turned to Gus, almost pleading, "I know her best." Clara's voice trembled, mingling pain with defiance. Tom's voice rose, a storm in his eyes mirroring the fury outside. Suddenly, the saloon door swung open again, this time with a force that sent a shiver down Clara's spine. In walked Charlie, a figure known for stirring trouble, a shadow that loomed too long over many lives. Charlie sneered, his voice oily and sharp. Clara's heart sank. Charlie was trouble. He exuded a confidence that unnerved her, a dark charisma that drew people in but left them scarred. "Back off, Charlie," Tom warned, his gaze hardening. Charlie laughed, stepping closer. "You think you can just stroll in here after years and sweep her away?" "Maybe so," Clara said, anger flaring. Tom stiffened beside her, his presence a wall against Charlie's taunts. "She's stronger than you think, Charlie." The atmosphere was heavy, the saloon buzzing with the unspoken tension of two souls caught in a storm of memories and unanswered questions. Clara saw the fight in Tom's stance, felt his protective nature wrap around her like an old coat, familiar but worn. "Clara," Tom said, his voice softer now, seeking connection through the chaos. "I'm not here to hurt you, I came to make things right." "Right," she shot back, bitterness creeping into her words. Tom's brow furrowed, understanding creeping into his expression. "No, but we need to talk." Clara could hear her heart pounding in her ears, a war building inside her. The room fell into silence, even the patrons pausing mid-sip, witnessing the unfolding drama. And then, just as she was about to respond, Charlie leaned in, his voice low and menacing. "Why don't you just admit it, Clara? You need someone to save you. You always have." Anger boiled over, igniting something within her. She shouted, the words bursting forth, fierce and unyielding. "I've stood on my own 2 feet long enough." Tom's eyes widened, the reality of her struggles echoing in the raw emotion of her outburst. "Clara, I know things have changed," he began cautiously, "but we could start again." She interrupted. "Do you think it's that easy?" You walked away, Tom. This time it was her strength that poured out like rain in a storm, washing over everything. Around her, the saloon felt alive, the air thick with anticipation, the people leaning in, craving resolution like moths to a flame. Tom took a step closer, his expression unwavering. "I know I made a mistake, but I'm here now. I've changed too." Charlie's voice cut through the tension again. "Change doesn't mean anything if you can't back it up." "Because she knows me," Tom said, the determination in his voice shimmering like light cutting through darkness. "She knows my heart and I know hers." For a while it felt as if the very air had drawn a breath, waiting. Clara felt the weight of those words sinking in, recognizing the truth behind them. Deep down, she too had been afraid of losing herself in old patterns, of once more relying on someone who had let her down. "Look, Charlie," Clara began, forcing her voice to stay steady despite the storm inside her. "I've fought through my demons and I've come out the other side. I won't let you use my past against me." Charlie mocked, his smile tight. "Maybe," she replied boldly, "but I'm not defined by it. I've learned to carry my scars like medals." The rumble of thunder outside blended into the words exchanged within the saloon, enveloping them all. There was power in vulnerability, and Clara found herself standing taller. "Listen," Tom said, his voice clear and unwavering. "Let's not let him draw us back into that darkness. We can kick him to the curb together." Charlie scoffed, but even he sensed the strength filling the room. More patrons began to murmur, emboldened by Clara's fire. "All right," she finally said, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through her. "I'll listen, but this has to be real." Tom nodded earnestly. No games. A newfound clarity settled over her, and as she looked around, the saloon transformed. It was no longer just a place of shadows. It had become a safe haven, a sanctuary where she could rebuild what was lost. Clara called out, and the bartender looked up, ready to listen. "I'd like a drink, something strong." Smiling, Gus poured her a glass, and as she took a sip, the warmth flooded her, igniting bravery within her soul. This was her moment, a crossroads in the life she had been fighting to reclaim. As the conversation unfolded, she and Tom began to share, voices laced with honesty and vulnerability. They spoke of hurt and ambition, of dreams that had slipped away, and of the hopes rekindled in moments of darkness. With each exchange, pieces of their past began to weave back together. The raw edges softened, and Clara found herself peeling back layers she thought she had buried for good. Time slipped by unnoticed, the clock ticking softly as they shared laughter and tears. The shadows of doubt faded, replaced with the light of understanding and connection. And as the night wore on, the storm outside began to ease, leaving behind quiet clarity. Clara couldn't erase what had happened. The scars remained, reminders of lessons learned. But she finally understood that healing was possible, and that sometimes the past wasn't just something to overcome, it could lead to opportunities to grow. As Gus cleaned up the bar, the patrons began to filter out one by one, leaving Clara and Tom alone in their corner. "Thank you for coming back," she said softly, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Tom smiled, relief spilling across his face. "Whatever comes next, I want to face it with courage," Clara declared, her voice strong. "And you will," Tom replied, taking her hand, the warmth sparking between them. And in the heart of that saloon, beneath the transforming light of revival, she felt it life blossoming anew, a story ready to be written with each turn of the page. They were both learning to navigate the storms, hand in hand, stronger together. This was more than a moment, it was a promise. Clara turned to face the rest of the world, no longer just a whisper in a corner, but a voice ready to soar. She slept in the saloon corner, her breathing deep and steady, surrounded by the noise of clinking glasses and laughter. The scent of whiskey hung thick in the air, weaving through murmurs of stories shared. It was a sanctuary, a place where the world blurred away, yet on this particular night, an electric anticipation pulsed through the room. The door swung open with a creak, and the warm light from the lanterns danced against the rain-slicked floor. A figure entered, silhouette strong against the storm outside. He paused, surveying the sea of faces, only to be drawn toward the corner where Clara lay. As if magnetized, he moved closer, his breath catching in his throat. He murmured, half to himself, half to the bartender, Gus, who stood polishing a glass behind the bar. "Yeah," Gus replied, his voice low, a knowing look in his eyes. Tom's heart raced at the sight. Clara had always been a dreamer, enveloped in a world of her own creation. Yet there she was, tucked away as if she might vanish if anyone dared to wake her. But could she remain there forever? As thoughts raced through his mind, memories flooded back, laughter beneath the stars, whispers shared over campfires, and bittersweet goodbyes that echoed in his ears. The saloon felt charged as he approached her, the air thick with questions and unspoken fears. Her presence was magnetic. He was both terrified and drawn to her all at once. Would she remember him the way he remembered her? Or had the years dimmed the light they once shared? Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment time froze. Clara blinked, confusion etched across her face. The laughter faded into silence as she recognized the man standing before her. She gasped, the name slipping from her lips like a prayer. Tom's heart pounded in his chest. Yeah. In that instant, the saloon came alive with whispers, the patrons leaning in, eager to witness the reunion they had only heard murmured about. Clara pushed herself to sit up, brushing back her tousled hair, her cheeks flushed with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. He took a deep breath, the weight of regret heavy on his shoulders. "I heard you were back in town," she pressed, tension hanging in the air like the humidity before a storm. "And I want to talk," he said, the edge of vulnerability cracking through his bravado. "I need you to listen to me." Clara scoffed, anger and hurt bubbling up inside her. "What gives you the right to just waltz in here after all this time? You left Tom." Around them, the saloon patrons murmured, sensing the storm brewing. Tom braced himself. This was the moment he had both dreaded and longed for, the chance to explain, to seek redemption. "I know that. I made mistakes. I pushed you away." Her eyes narrowed, confusion mixing with a spark of something deeper, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or was it just the stings of the past? "You didn't forget." "Things got complicated," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I had to sort myself out." Clara shot back, her voice rising, fierce and unyielding. "You thought running away would protect me." Heavy silence fell, punctuated only by the distant rumble of thunder outside. Tom's heart ached at the truth in her words. His decisions had been selfish, made during a time when fear had gripped him like a vice. "I was scared," he admitted, the honesty raw and exposed. The emotions crackled in the air. Clara's gaze dropped momentarily, a battle raging within her that mirrored the storm outside. She had had years to think about their time together, to move forward while his absence had left a gaping wound in her heart. Would she dare to let him back in? Before she could respond, a loud crash broke the tension. The door flew open again, and in stumbled Charlie, a local troublemaker known for stirring up chaos. A shameless grin spread across his face, the kind that promised trouble. He sauntered toward their corner, barely noticing the charged atmosphere hanging between Clara and Tom. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence," Charlie smirked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The prodigal son returns." "Leave us alone, Charlie," Tom warned, stepping toward him. "Why should I?" Charlie's words clawed at Clara's chest, each jibe struck like a knife, echoing her own insecurities about whether she could truly handle Tom's return. I don't need your commentary, she said, voice steady even as her heart raced. Tom turned his gaze back to her, desperation spilling through. Maybe she should, Charlie chimed in, a smug grin on his face. You think he's changed, Clara snapped. The words burst forth, igniting a fire within her that had long been dormant. She had spent too long feeling like a victim, trapped between shadows of her past. You don't get to dictate my life, Charlie. In that moment, the saloon felt electric, filled with the energy of her declaration. The patrons turned their heads, drawn into the unfolding drama, eager to witness the turning tide. Tom stepped closer to Clara, his expression resolute. You're stronger than you realize. She whispered, her anger fading to uncertainty. Because I couldn't face my own demons, Tom admitted, eyes blazing, but I never stopped thinking about you. Clara felt her heart twisting in response. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the deep echoes of a love that had merely paused, but could it truly be restarted? How many scars had their relationship left behind? Listen, Tom continued, his voice softer now. What happened between us, every moment, every mistake, it mattered. Around them, silence fell, every set of eyes glued to the two. The weight of their shared history hung heavy, pushing and pulling between them. I don't know, Tom, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm afraid. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, he said earnestly. But I can promise you I won't run away this time. Please, let's start over. Let's carve a new path. The room held its breath, the quiet pregnant with possibility. Clara searched his eyes, hoping to find a glimmer of the boy she had known and the man he'd become. Just then, the bartender, Gus, approached, breaking the tension with his weathered wisdom. Clara, you've grown into a woman who can make your own choices. His words resonated, cutting through the remnants of doubt like a clear bell ringing in her mind. Clara looked around the saloon, eyes meeting those of the patrons. Face reflected understanding, stories of their own battles etched in lines and creases. I need some time to think, she finally said, soft but steady, her heart racing with uncertainty but embracing the truth. Tom nodded, his features softening. Charlie rolled his eyes, dismissing their exchange, leaning against the bar. You think she'll wait around? But Clara no longer felt the sting of his words. It didn't matter what he thought. She had found her voice again, and it resonated deep within her. Turning back to Tom, Clara took a deep breath. I'll think about it, but if I decide to let you back in, you better be ready to earn that trust again. No more running, Tom. Relief flooded his features. As the night continued, the saloon slowly regained its rhythm, laughter and chatter swaying like a tide. But for Clara, everything had shifted. She felt lighter, unburdened in the acceptance of her own power to choose. Tom stayed close, their conversations bouncing between hesitant laughter and earnest confessions. Time felt different now, shaped by the recognition that they still had a chance, not just to remember the past, but to build a future. As the first light of dawn began to filter in, shimmering through raindrops clinging to the windows, Clara knew she had made the right choice. She wouldn't settle for shadows anymore. She'd reclaim her place in the world and decide who would walk it with her. Emerging from the saloon, Tom at her side, the storm receded, replaced by the promise of a new beginning. Together, they stepped forward into the light, ready to navigate whatever lay ahead. There was strength in vulnerability and hope in choice. Clara held her head high, her heart unchained, knowing the battle was just beginning, but feeling ready to fight. She slept in the saloon corner, a shadow among shadows, her chestnut hair spilled like a waterfall over the edge of the rickety bench. The lamplight flickered, casting shadows that danced around her, mingling with the soft murmurs and laughter echoing through the dark wooden room. Outside, rain pelted the earth like an impatient lover, while inside, the saloon thrummed with life, but she remained untouched in her slumber. The bartender, Gus, wiped down the bar with a rag that had seen better days. Glanced in her direction, concern etched on his weathered face. Clara had found her place here, but it wasn't just from the solace of a warm drink. It was a refuge from a world that had hurt her deeply. As the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted. A storm of tension brewed, tightening like a noose around the patrons who had gathered to escape their own lives. A heavy door swung open, and in walked a figure tall and broad-shouldered, drenched from the rain. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward him. It was Tom, a ghost of her past, stumbling into the present with a weight of memory clinging to him. He called, voice rough with urgency. Gus pointed a gnarled finger toward the corner, and Tom's gaze settled on Clara. For a moment, time held its breath. Memories crashed over Tom like waves, swirling with laughter, love, and an unforgettable ache. He had left, but the echoes of their shared moments pulsed in his blood, reminding him of what he had lost. Clara stirred, sensing the tension in the room. She blinked sleepily, her heart racing as she caught sight of Tom. The memories, vivid and bittersweet, washed over her like the rain outside. Her voice was hushed, a question that hung in the charged air. Yeah, he replied, stepping closer, his pulse quickening. Clara pushed herself up, her heart beating wildly as the saloon buzzed with curiosity. She asked, battling a swirl of emotions, anger, fear, and a flicker of hope she couldn't ignore. Tom ran a hand through his damp hair, desperation pooling in his eyes. Clara's voice trembled, every word laced with pain. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he said, his voice almost breaking. I made mistakes, Clara, but those words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. She stared at him, a cocktail of memories crashing together, laughter under starlit skies, the whispers shared in the shadows. Yet with each passing day in his absence, she had learned to breathe without him. She had fought through the night, stumbling through sorrow to find her light. Things aren't so simple anymore, Clara said, summoning the strength that had grown inside her. Tom took another step forward, an intent look in his eyes. I know that, but I need you to understand I never stopped caring about you. Before Clara could respond, Charlie pushed his way through the crowd and swayed toward them, cocky as ever. Well, he drawled, looking Tom up and down with an arrogant smirk. The boy's back in town. I'm not in the mood for your games, Charlie, Tom replied, his voice steady but tense. Charlie laughed, leaning against a nearby table. This is more like a tragedy. Shut it, Clara snapped, her head spinning with frustration. Tom's eyes flashed with gratitude at her defiance. At a prize to be won. Charlie chuckled, a chilling sound. Oh, I see, you've finally grown a spine, but let's be real, she doesn't need you. Look where she is. Don't you dare, Clara warned, standing her ground, heart pounding in her chest. I fought too hard to build my life. That's right, Tom said, stepping even closer to her, a barrier against the darkness Charlie embodied. Around them, the saloon buzzed with anticipation, hanging on every word as Clara's emotions roiled beneath the surface. I'm not afraid of you, Charlie, she finally declared, her voice fierce. I've faced worse than you. I'm standing tall, and I'll keep standing tall. For a brief moment, Tom's gaze softened, pride flooding through him. Clara was not the girl he once left behind. She had grown into a force, an unyielding, radiant spirit, and though pain lingered in the edges of their reunion, he saw the opportunity for something different. Tom began, but Charlie interrupted, smirking. Why don't you save the sappy talk for later? Gus's voice thundered over the growing chaos, the bartender's patience wearing thin. Charlie scowled but recognized the warning in Gus's tone. Fine, enjoy your reunion, but don't say I didn't warn you when the dust settles. Charlie sauntered away. Clara felt her heartbeat begin to calm slightly. She asked, turning back to Tom, her brow furrowed with concern. Just words, he doesn't know us, Tom replied, his eyes steady. But something deeper lurked beneath their surface, an underlying truth he had been wrestling with since that fateful day when he had made his choice to leave. She echoed, frustration building. You left, Tom. Yeah, I know, and I regret it every day, he said, a crack in his voice. But I'm here now. And I want to talk. Can we please just sit down? Clara hesitated, caught between anger and something else, an all too familiar longing. The memories surged, and she yearned for the hope they had once cultivated together. Finally nodding, she murmured, okay. With that, they found a table tucked in a quieter corner of the saloon. Clara combed her fingers through her hair, the weight of their shared past heavy on her shoulders. Tom sat across from her, an air of resolve wrapped around him as he leaned forward. I've missed you, he began, his voice low, filled with sincerity. I've thought about you every day since I left. I don't know if I can just forget everything, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't understand how void your absence created in my life. Tom nodded, eyes shimmering with regret. I know I hurt you. I wish I could take it back, but I've changed. Change doesn't come easy, she said, her heart pounding. I'm willing to earn it, he declared, his resolve unshaken, every day. Clara studied his face, searching for signs of the boy she once loved. The years had sculpted him, but the softness in his eyes remained the same. Yet doubt gnawed at her heart. Could they reconstruct what had been shattered? The saloon around them buzzed quietly, the patrons now engrossed in their own conversations. Outside, the storm began to subside, a gentle patter of rain tapping against the windows. I remember the good times, you know, Clara said, her voice softening. The nights we sat by the fire, dreaming of the future. We did, Tom replied, sincerity lacing his tone. And I still believe we can create something special again, but I can't do it alone, and I don't want to force you to forget the past. Tears pricked at her eyes, the weight of memories surfacing like bubbles in still water. You were my light, Tom. And I found darkness I thought I could outrun, he whispered, vulnerability breaking through the surfaces they had both built. But I want to understand your darkness. Time ticked by as they exchanged truths. Clara felt a shift, a softening in the steel walls she had built. But it was scary. Would she fall again? Would she trust him? Or would it all shatter before her eyes? Let me prove it to you, Tom said, persistence etched in his features. Let's start over, one step at a time, no high expectations. She questioned, curiosity mingling with hesitation. Yeah, you can show me your world. Let's explore what could be. Clara exhaled, a mixture of hope and apprehension swirling in her chest. Outside the walls of the saloon, where they had once carved their names in the stars, there could be territories untamed, a future waiting to be written. Okay, she finally said, her heart racing at the words she dared to speak. I'll give it a chance, but this is a slow journey. He smiled, and the warmth of it settled over her like a blanket. Slowly the storm began to fade, its once raging fury transforming into a gentle rain, softening the edges of their emotions. Clara knew the road wouldn't be easy, but she felt a flicker of courage igniting within her, an ember that had been dormant for far too long. With determination etched across her features and hope blossoming in her heart, she took Tom's hand. Together, they ventured outside, leaving the saloon behind as they stepped into a world that had been waiting for them, filled with both promise and uncertainty. As they walked down the rain-slicked street, two souls intertwined on their journey, Clara held tight to the belief that broken things could be mended. Together, they would face the future one step at a time, one heartbeat at a time, ready to write a new story. She slept in the saloon corner, the heavy murmur of voices swirling around her like a protective blanket. Clara was a fixture in this dingy establishment, nestled among the shadows and the worn furniture, the smell of stale beer and wood polish enveloping her. The soft, flickering lamplight painted her features in a dreamlike haze, making her look almost ethereal. As night fell, the saloon pulsed with life. Laughter erupted, glasses clinked, and the occasional shout of camaraderie filled the air. Yet amid the chaos, Clara remained undisturbed, slumbering in a world of her own creation. She had found solace here, a small escape from a life that had tumbled into disarray. But on that particular night, the door swung open with a jarring creak. All eyes turned, curiosity igniting the atmosphere like a match to dry wood. In walked Tom, his presence commanding and magnetic. He was drenched from the rain outside, his clothes clinging to him like a second skin. He looked around, scanning the room until his gaze landed on Clara. Time seemed to stop. Clara's heart thudded in her chest as memories began flooding back. The laughter they had once shared, the promises lingered in the corners of her mind, the warmth of his embrace, the sweetness of stolen kisses, but so much had changed since then. He called out, his voice gritty with urgency, echoing across the saloon. Gus, the bartender with a face weathered by time, nodded towards the corner. Still there, Tom took a few steps forward, his breath hitching. Clara stirred, her eyelids fluttering open, confusion marring her features as she met the piercing gaze of the man she once loved. She whispered, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. Her sudden awareness brought the saloon to hush. Every patron leaned in, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Tom stepped closer, vulnerability etched in his expression. "It's me," he said, almost pleading. Clara asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "I had to see you," he replied, an ache evident in his tone. "I heard you were back in town." Clara scoffed, pushing herself upright, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest. "You had years to care, Tom, because I never stopped thinking about you," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I made mistakes." Clara felt warmth and anger battling within her. Memories of shared dreams and whispered secrets mixed with the pain of abandonment. Raw emotions surged. She could feel the torrent brewing beneath the surface. She shot back. "I want to try," he insisted. Just then the saloon door swung open again, and came Charlie, a familiar troublemaker brimming with bravado. "Look who it is, the legend himself, back to claim what he lost," he bellowed, unsteady on his feet. The atmosphere snapped with tension. Tom's expression soured. "Oh, but it might just be," Charlie responded, smirking as he leaned against a table. "I'm not here for games," Tom said, tension radiating off him. Clara felt the heat of those words, the way Tom stood beside her, defiant against the noise. She felt strong despite the chaotic environment swirling around them. But the past was a double-edged sword, a reminder of the love that had sparked and flared only to be extinguished too soon. "Clara doesn't need saving," Charlie jeered, his confidence a venomous edge. "You wouldn't know," Clara retorted, her voice steady. Suddenly, the entire saloon seemed to hold its breath. Clara looked at Tom. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, as if he were watching her reclaim her strength in real time. "It's easy to talk big, Clara," Charlie said, dismissing her words, "but the truth is you've been sleeping here on your own." But Tom interjected, stepping forward protectively. His voice was steady, filled with an unwavering belief that ignited hope within Clara. Clara felt a warm swell inside her at his words. Maybe she had been fighting. Maybe all those sleepless nights weren't for nothing. She swallowed hard, pushing Charlie to the back of her mind, focusing instead on Tom's wide, earnest gaze. "I've had to learn to stand on my own, Tom," Clara said, her voice holding firm. "Every night spent here was a reminder of what I had lost, but it was also my chance to grow." Tom's expression softened, but the intensity between them remained palpable. "I know I've hurt you," Clara hesitated, caught between the urge to open her heart and the fear that it would shatter again. She asked, her voice wavering. "I was lost," Tom admitted. "I thought running away would protect you, but I see now that it only led us both to pain. I can't run again, not now." Clara searched his eyes, the sincerity poured forth like rushing water. Could she allow herself to believe in that vulnerability? Could she risk trusting him again? "I'm not sure if I can forgive you, Tom," she said, the ache in her chest feeling heavy, "but right now I just want to be honest." As she spoke those words, Charlie started to inch closer again, his mocking tone resurfacing. "This is pathetic," he sneered. "You're both clinging to something dead," but something had shifted inside Clara. She turned from Charlie, refocusing on Tom, strength building within her. "You may not know what's possible," Clara continued, her words steady. "But I know that I deserve to feel empowered, respected, and loved." The saloon began to buzz again as patrons stirred, murmuring amongst themselves. It was a moment that felt monumental both for Clara and Tom. They were standing on the precipice of something new, and those shadows of the past loomed, light glimmered through them. "Let's leave," Tom suggested, his voice calm. "We can talk somewhere else." Charlie's laughter filled the air, dripping with sarcasm. "Running away again." But Clara had grown tired of the noise, the judgment. "Let's go," she told Tom, determination edging her voice. They slipped into the night, the cool air washing over them like a balm. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under the faint moonlight. Tom asked, glancing at her with anticipation. "Anywhere but here," Clara replied, her heart racing as they walked side by side. Each step fueled her resolve, the weight of their past mingling with the promise of what might be ahead. As they wandered through the dimly lit alleyways, Clara felt the tension of the night begin to dissolve. With each step, she shed layers of fear and doubt, exposing a self that had been tucked away for too long. Clara asked, glancing sideways, watching Tom's face. He smiled, warmth radiating between them. "Of course." "I used to think we could escape everything," she mused, her heart beginning to open again. "Just you and me, us against the world," he echoed softly. "That's still a dream worth chasing, Clara, but it has to be real this time." They found themselves by the old oak, its branches reaching towards the stars, a familiar haven. Clara leaned against the trunk, breathing in memories, allowing herself to get lost in the nostalgia. "Maybe we don't have to conquer the world," she said finally, sharing a moment of honesty. Tom stepped closer, his presence solid and reassuring. "Then let's start here, right now." The warmth of those words enveloped Clara, and for the first time she felt the shadows recede. "Together," she whispered, feeling hope unfurling within her like fresh blooms in the spring. As they talked, the promise of new beginnings lingered in the air, wrapping around them as the night deepened. Shared story, laughter bubbled up, and the weight of the past began to feel lighter. Clara realized that healing was not a linear path, but here she didn't have to walk it alone. Each step with Tom felt like a rediscovery of herself, a pathway illuminated by the flicker of hope mingled with hard-earned trust. In that quiet corner by the old oak, they found themselves and tentatively began to weave their stories together again, embracing the uncertainty and the potential of a future uncharted. "I promise to show you the best of me," Tom said, his voice filled with vulnerability that touched her heart. Clara nodded, feeling the resolve in her soul. The past wouldn't be erased, but it had woven them into who they were today. Together, they would craft a new narrative, one built on understanding and mutual respect. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, Clara and Tom took a leap of faith, embarking on a new journey that began not in a saloon corner, but in the heart of a moment where light pierced through shadows, revealing the beauty of second chances. She slept in the saloon corner, the weight of the world resting on her chest like a heavy blanket. The wooden floor creaked under the weight of the few patrons, wrapped in their own stories, unaware of the depths of her slumber. Clara was a fixture in this dimly lit establishment, the faint glow of lanterns illuminating her silhouette against the wall. It was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where she could cocoon herself in dreams when reality felt too overwhelming. But this particular night was different. A storm raged outside, rain pounding the roof like a relentless drumming. Inside, the saloon buzzed with an electrifying energy, laced with the scent of whiskey and the laughter of hardened souls seeking solace. And then, as the door swung open with a startling creak, the room fell silent. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the swirling darkness. Tom. His presence ignited something deep within Clara, a spark of recognition that pulled her from sleep. He stood there, soaked from the rain, chest rising and falling as if he had just run a marathon. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. Memories flooded her tender moments beneath starlit skies, laughter echoing through the woods and the warmth of whispered secrets. But that was before. Clara sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, heart racing. She managed, fighting against the flood of emotions threatening to drown her. "I had to find you," Tom said, his voice rough, almost desperate. Clara shot back, a mix of confusion and hurt simmering just below the surface. "Because I need to explain," he pleaded, stepping forward. Glimmers of anger ignited within her. "You didn't just leave, Tom. You vanished. I thought you were gone for good." The room was a cauldron of tension now, the patrons watching, some moving in closer, sensing the drama unfolding between them. Gus, the bartender, wiped his hands on a rag but remained nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. "Clara, please," he continued. "I know I screwed up, but I need you to understand." She almost laughed, bitterness creeping into her voice. "You think being scared gives you an excuse to disappear. I know," Tom said, remorse flooding his expression. "And I regret it every single day, but I want to make it right." Her heart ached at his sincerity, but doubt nestled in the corners of her mind. Could she trust him after everything? Just as she was wrestling with herself, the saloon doors flew open again, and in came Charlie, a local troublemaker who thrived on chaos and conflict. Well, 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 Charlie sneered, strutting over as if he owned the place. "Look who's back just in time for the drama." "Just go away, Charlie," Tom said, annoyance creeping into his voice. "What?" Charlie chuckled, taking a swig from a bottle. "Actually, I do," Tom replied, taking a step closer to Clara, the protective instinct kicking in hard. "Clara, come on," Charlie continued, his tone mocking. "You don't really believe this guy, do you?" And that struck a chord. Clara turned to Tom, her heart racing. "You left me to fight my own battles." Tom opened his mouth to speak, but the words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Charlie surged forward, leaning against the edge of their table. "What, you think he can save you? You think you need saving?" Tom shouted, his frustration boiling over. Clara looked between them, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but Charlie wasn't finished. You think you're something special, don't you? He cares about you now, she snapped, her own voice rising above the chaos. You don't get to speak for me. Every single day I've fought to reclaim my life without him, and I'm stronger for it. A hush fell over the saloon. Clara's words hung in the air, a declaration of promise. Tom's eyes widened, admiration and concern battling within him. Whatever trust we had before is gone, she continued, the fire in her voice steady. But I'm not just a victim. I've built something on my own. Tom stepped closer, eyes fixed on her. Clara, I want to be that person for you, someone who stands beside you, not in your shadow. She asked, doubt lacing her words, yet a hint of hope flickered through the uncertainty. Because I understand now that love isn't just about the good times, it's about facing the darkness together, he replied, his voice low but steady. But Charlie, reveling in the conflict, unleashed another round of taunts. Darkness, please, you're both drowning in it. In that moment, Clara moved closer to Tom, her heart pounding in her chest. Stop it, Charlie, you don't control my narrative. Around them, the patrons leaned in, captivated by the unfolding drama, and it struck Clara that she was finally taking control of her own narrative. On it, he replied, already pouring her a whiskey. The amber liquid glinted in the dim light as he placed it in front of her. She raised the glass, holding it firmly in her hand. Here's to new chapters, she declared, her voice breaking through the storm that had enveloped her life. Here's to earning trust, Tom added, raising his own glass as if sealing a pact between them. They clinked glasses, the sound sharp and resonant, and Clara felt a surge of determination. This was not just about Tom, it was about her choice, her strength. For a moment, the saloon swelled with hopes and dreams untold, the weight of connection thickening the air. But Charlie sneered, still lurking. I'm done with your negativity, Charlie, Clara said, tossing back her drink. You have no hold over me or my happiness. Tom smiled at her, admiration shining in his eyes. Let's go, Clara said suddenly, her pulse quickening at the thought of stepping into the unknown. He asked, his expression shifting to one of curiosity. Anywhere but here. On that cue, they pushed past the remnants of Charlie's sneering attitude and made their way to the door. The night air felt electric as they stepped outside. The rain had finally subsided, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the night sky. Tom asked, glancing around as if searching for the right path. The old oak tree, Clara suggested, her voice steady, certainty guiding her steps. They walked in silence, the moonlight spilling across the path, illuminating their way. Each step brought Clara closer to a mix of excitement and anxiety, an unfamiliar blend she hadn't felt in years. When they reached the old oak, Clara paused, memories flooding back to her days spent laughing and dreaming under its sprawling branches. This place has always felt like home, she murmured. Tom stepped close, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. She could feel the gravity of their unspoken words hanging in the air, heavy yet hopeful. Tell me about the girl who used to sit beneath this tree, he urged softly. Clara's chest tightened at the question, a rush of vulnerability washing over her. She wanted to believe in love, to trust that it could be real, she confessed, looking down at her hands. Tom prompted gently. Clara looked up, locking her gaze onto his. She's learned that life isn't just about what others expect, it's about finding the strength within to chase her own dreams. Tom nodded, understanding deepening in his eyes. I want to be part of those dreams, Clara. Together, she whispered, feeling a warmth blossom in her heart, but it has to be real this time. I promise, he said, the earnestness in his voice wrapping around her like a soft embrace. As they stood together under the canopy of the ancient oak, Clara felt her fears begin to dissolve, replaced by an exhilarating sense of possibility. Maybe they could build something stronger than before, something rooted in trust and understanding. Let's dream again, Tom, she said, her voice finally steady and sure. The night air carried a sense of promise, echoing with laughter from distant memories and new beginnings. They held onto that moment, a fragile union of hope and willingness that could blossom into something beautiful. And as they shared their pasts and forged their futures, Clara felt alive again. Together, they were ready to write the next chapter, one filled with laughter and light, blending their stories into a tapestry of love, strength, and unbreakable bonds. Under that tree, with the stars as witnesses, they began anew, ready to embrace the journey ahead. She slept in the saloon corner, sheltered by the dim light and surrounded by a haze of tobacco smoke and whispered secrets. The old wooden bar creaked with the weight of stories untold. Clara had become a fixture in this rundown establishment, a ghost among flesh and bone, retreating into her dreams while the world spun madly around her. But on that stormy night, everything changed. The door swung open with a force that drew eyes, not just because of the thunder rumbling outside, but because of the man who stepped through the threshold. Tom. He was soaked to the bone, drops of rain cascading off his shoulders like a waterfall, his eyes wild with urgency. Clara stirred from her slumber, blinking the sleep away, and for a moment time stood still. Memories throbbed in her chest, both sweet and painful, laughter shared, promises whispered, and a heart shattered into a million pieces. Tom's voice shattered the murmur of the saloon, his gaze frantically scanning the room until it landed on her. Right there, Gus, the bartender replied, wiping his hands on a stained apron. He had seen their type before, lost lovers finding their way back home, but this time the emotions felt more visceral, more alive. Clara felt her heart slam against her ribs as Tom approached. She pushed herself up, dread and hope battling in her stomach. She asked, her voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I came to find you," he said, his brow furrowed with urgency. "You had years to see me," Clara shot back, bitterness creeping in. "Because I realized what I lost," he admitted, desperation lacing his words. "I need you to understand I didn't want to leave." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Clara inhaled, the memories crashing over her like tidal waves. Voices laughed in the background, but all she could hear was her heart screaming for closure. She fired back. "You walked away, Tom. You chose silence." There it was, the weight of his absence, the loneliness that had filled her days, the night spent grasping for the remnants of what they once had. "I know I messed up," he pleaded, stepping closer, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. But Clara's resolve hardened. "I don't want your explanations." Just then the door swung open again and Charlie, a local troublemaker known for his biting tongue and swagger, sauntered in, breaking the fragile tension in the air. Well, look who's crawling back." "Hard to miss the old flame," he drawled, leaning against the bar with a cocky smile. "Charlie, just go," Tom warned, irritation creeping into his tone. Charlie retorted, taking a swig from a bottle that glistened under the dim light. "This is rich. You left her hanging like an old coat, and now you're back to lift her spirits." "Shut up, Charlie," Clara interjected, her voice capturing the attention of the saloon. She felt the warmth of courage igniting within her. Charlie lined in, his voice mocking. "You've been sleeping in this corner, pretending to be okay." The crowd was on edge, tension thickening in the air. Clara clenched her fists, the way Charlie's words sliced through her heart. She wasn't a victim in this, and she refused to be treated like one any longer. She shot back, the fire in her voice turning the tide. Tom watched her, admiration mixed with a hint of regret hovering in his eyes. "Clara, I never meant to make you feel that way. I was lost, and running was the only thing I thought I could do, but I can't run any longer." Clara pressed, feeling the layers of hurt bubbling to the surface. "I know, and for that I'm sorry," he replied, his voice raw, filled with untold pain. Fragile silence enveloped them, everyone in the saloon collectively holding their breath, drawn into the raw energy of the moment. But Charlie wasn't ready to back down. "You really think you can just walk back in and sweep her off her feet?" Charlie sneered, reveling in the challenge. Clara, feeling emboldened, stepped forward, defiance clear in her eyes. "I don't need anyone to claim me. I've learned to stand on my own." Tom's heart raced as he witnessed her transformation. "Clara is right," he said. "You don't get to dictate what happens here." But Charlie scoffed, unfazed. "Where were you when she was picking up the pieces?" "Maybe," Clara said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing within her. The tension electrified the air, the invisible strings connecting them stretching taut. For the first time since Tom had walked back into her life, Clara felt a spark of hope flicker. "I'm not looking for easy answers," she added, turning back to Tom, vulnerability creeping in. "I'm ready for that," Tom replied, sincerity etched in his every feature. As she looked into his eyes, she felt a rush of emotions, the pain, the anger, the flicker of a love she thought was lost forever. Could she truly allow herself to hope? But then a loud crash shattered the moment. The saloon's door burst open violently, and in strode a man like a storm, wild-eyed and desperate. He shouted, panic etched into his face. The room went silent, the atmosphere shifting like a sudden gust of wind. The man's voice rose above the soft murmurs, his eyes scanning the crowd before they settled on Clara and Tom. "You have to help me, there's danger coming." Clara felt the weight of his words hit her like a wave. "Who?" she demanded, her pulse racing. The man took a step closer, urgency spilling from him. "I can't explain all the details now, but I've seen them. They're looking for you, Clara." Tom stepped forward, concern painted across his face. The man gasped, his eyes wide with fear. "Just trust me." Clara's heart thundered in her chest, panic intertwining with uncertainty. Danger, what danger? She felt her world tilt, the ground beneath her shaking. What did this man know, and why was it focused on her? Tom's reassuring presence beside her felt suddenly fragile. They had just begun to navigate their complex history, and now they were faced with an entirely new foe. "Clara, we need to go now," Tom instructed, urgency lacing his tone. She protested, fear clutching at her throat. "What does he mean?" "I promise I'll explain everything, but we don't have the luxury of time right now," he insisted, determination written all over his face. Everyone in the saloon seemed to tense, glancing at the door where the oppressive weight of uncertainty loomed. Clara felt the world spin, the weight of choices pressing down. Charlie shouted, stepping up defiantly. Clara snapped, a newfound fire igniting inside her. This was no longer about the past, this was about survival. Silence filled the room again, the air thick with fear and anticipation. Clara's heart raced as she faced Tom, knowing they were on the brink of something monumental, not just between the two of them, but within herself. "Get ready," Tom whispered, and they exchanged a glance filled with unspoken determination. As the tension hung heavy, Clara felt the exhilarating rush of uncertainty. It was like standing on the edge of a precipice ready to leap, but unsure of where she would land. and then without any warning, the saloon doors burst open once more, this time revealing a group of men, faces obscured by shadows, but the menace in their eyes unmistakable. Clara's heart dropped, realization flooding in. They were here. They were coming for her. With her breath caught in her throat, she stepped backward, her pulse quickening. Was this truly the end, or could she dig deep and fight for the life she had clawed back from despair? Tom shouted just as the first man lunged forward, the scene erupting into chaos. The saloon doors stood wide open, a threshold not just to the outside world but to uncertainty, to danger and to choices that would define them all. Clara knew in that moment every second counted. It was no longer just about her past but a fight for her future, and she would be damned if she let anyone take that away from her now. The adrenaline surged, carrying her forward, ready to confront whatever lay ahead in a night that was far from over.